Today on the Ginger Engine we read and review the second book of the railway series Thomas the Tank Engine, which was published on the 18th of October 1946. However, will our non-Thomas fan give this book a yay or nay? Stay tuned to find out. Welcome aboard the Ginger Engine. First of all, we need to check your tickets. How do you do that? By hitting subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. We'll be sure to always keep the trains running on schedule. Today you have your driver, which will be myself, Andrew Durning, your fireman,
Thomas Lawrence,
your very important passenger,
Fran Gilmartin,
and joining us on this journey now is our railway inspector, Matthew Hilly.
Hiya.
Matthew, thank you for coming on. Look, your arm has been twisted. You joined us for the first one, and then we just got your claws in, or AKA we just didn't like you leave.
Sounds about right, yep.
So how you feeling about being part of the steam team, a good steam team this time?
I'm actually looking forward to continuing the story and finding out what happens with Thomas and his pals.
Yeah. Well, believe
I want to meet Thomas.
Yeah.
I've not met Thomas yet.
Should
Should be Edward and Henry, their pals.
Yeah. Well, you'll be very pleased to know that for this next book, this is where Thomas actually comes to play, because the second book, ironically, is called Thomas the Tank Engine. So before we dive in, I'll give you the bit of the backstory which we got from our very own Thomas Wiki, Luke Bainham. So this section is Learning with Luke. So the Thomas the Tank Engine book was first published on the 18th of October 1946. Christopher Audrey, Reverend Audrey's son, wanted a model of Gordon built, but it was too difficult for the Reverend to make, so he made a model blue tank engine out of a piece of broomstick, and Christopher asked for a book about this specific engine and suggested that he call the character Thomas. That's right, it wasn't the Reverend W. Audrey who came up with the name, it was his son Christopher, which is quite advanced for, I would say, as well, like 3 or 4 at this point. The book was illustrated by Reginald Payne. He started to make the engines look a bit more realistic, because Thomas was originally meant to be a LNER class J50. So the LNER stands for London North Eastern Railway. Payne had misunderstood Audrey's concept of the design and made him London Brighton and a South Coast Railway E2 instead. While he was a bit annoyed at Payne for doing this, the fact that Payne explained he was basing Thomas on a real life engine, it made Audrey satisfied, because what he was looking for by this point was realism. Sadly though, Payne couldn't continue after this book due to having a bit of a nervous breakdown and suffering from mental health issues. Anybody that has watched my previous work knows that I understand this very well. So it was the only book that he illustrated, but at the same time, what a book he got to illustrate. So what do you make of all these wee bits of trivia?
The guy who's only been able to do the illustrations for the one book, and I guess it makes this particular book particularly unique then.
Yeah. One of the things that will be in the longer video, but I found it quite interesting, was when Dolby went back and re-illustrated, there was a lot of things that he changed about the illustrations. For example, Henry in this original illustration, he had like a copper chimney pot, which was common for Great Western engines at the time. And when Dolby went back and re-illustrated him, he took the copper pot away. Henry also had rectangular buffers when Payne illustrated it, and Dolby gave him the round buffers. So it was like him putting his own wee stamp on it. But also, as I mentioned in the 3 Railway Engines book, Henry had a bit of a backstory because he didn't get illustrated the way that Audrey wanted him. Audrey wanted Henry to be a 442 Great Central Robinson Atlantic, and Middleton at the time illustrated him as a 462 Gordon. Then, when it was re-illustrated by Reginald Payne, once he came on, he got it wrong again. It wasn't an Atlantic, but he basically did look identical to Gordon, with the only defining feature being his copper chimney cap. And then, as another bit of a kick in the tender for Henry, when Dobby went back and re-illustrated him, he made him a 460. So once again, Henry got the short end of the stick. He just never caught a break. But that actually worked out to his favour in his own book, but we'll get to that when the time comes. I think maybe it's time that we dive in to Thomas. We find out a bit more about his backstory, where he came from, his stories. I mean, everybody in the fandom knows about Thomas's journeys. So what did you think when you first got introduced to Thomas?
I honestly quite liked Thomas's like sort of little trilogy, if I'm being honest, because it's like first see him as like this cheeky character who just likes to basically cause mischief for like the bigger engines, but like by the end of the book he actually then becomes a full fleshed out character. Just nice to see him being a bit less cheeky but more useful.
He does get an actual character arc, and I think that kind of shows how Audrey's style was developing.
Aye.
He starts off in one place, like he learns his lessons throughout, and then by the end of it he's a completely different character, even though he looks exactly the same.
Aye.
But this is something that we will dive into right now for our railway reviews as we read Thomas the Tank Engine.
Thomas and Gordon. Thomas was a tank engine who lived at a big station. He had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. He was a fussy little engine, always pulling coaches about. He pulled them to the station, ready for the big engines to take out on long journeys. And when trains came in, and the people had got out, he would pull the empty coaches away so that the big engines could go and rest. He was a cheeky little engine too. He thought no engine worked as hard as he did, so he used to play tricks on them. He liked best of all to come quietly beside a big engine dozing on a siding and make him jump.
Peep, 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 peep! Wake up, lazy bones!
He would whistle.
Why don't you work hard like me?
Then he would laugh rudely and run away to find some more coaches. One day Gordon was resting on a siding. He was very tired. The big express he always pulled had been late, and he had to run as fast as he could to make up for lost time. He was just going to sleep when Thomas came up with his cheeky way.
Wake up, lazy bones!
He whistled.
Do some hard work for a change. You can't catch me!
And he ran off laughing. Instead of going to sleep again, Gordon thought how he could pay Thomas out. One morning Thomas wouldn't wake up. His driver and fireman couldn't make him start. His fire went out and there was not enough steam. It was nearly time for the express. The people were waiting, but the coaches weren't ready. At last, Thomas started.
Oh dear,
He yawned.
Come on,
said the coaches.
hurry up!
Thomas gave them a rude bump and started for the station.
Don't stop dawdling, don't stop dawdling.
He grumbled.
Where have you been? Where have you been?
Asked the coaches crossly. Thomas fussed into the station where Gordon was waiting.
Poop, 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 hurry up you.
Said Gordon crossly.
Peep, 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 hurry yourself.
Said cheeky Thomas.
Yes,
Said Gordon.
I will.
And almost before the coaches had stopped moving, Gordon came out of his siding and was coupled to the train.
Poop, poop,
He whistled.
get in quickly please.
So the people got in quickly, the signal went down, the clock struck the hour, the guard waved his green flag, and Gordon was ready to start. Thomas usually pushed behind the big trains to help them start, but he was always uncoupled first, so that when the train was running nicely he could stop and go back. This time he was late, and Gordon started so quickly that they forgot to uncouple Thomas.
Poop, poop,
Said Gordon.
peep, peep, peep.
Whistled Thomas.
Come on,
Puffed Gordon to the coaches.
pull harder,
Puffed Thomas to Gordon. The heavy train slowly began to move out of the station. The train went faster and faster, too fast for Thomas. He wanted to stop, but he couldn't.
Peep, peep, stop, stop.
He whistled.
Hurry, hurry, hurry.
Laughed Gordon in front.
You can't get away, you can't get away.
Laughed the coaches. Poor Thomas was going faster than he'd ever gone before. He was out of breath and his wheels hurt him. But he had to go on.
I shall never be the same again.
He thought sadly.
My wheels will be quite worn out.
At last they stopped at a station. Everyone laughed to see Thomas puffing and panting behind. They uncoupled him, put him on a turntable, and then he ran on a sliding out of the way.
Well, little Thomas,
Chuckled Gordon as he passed.
and now you know what hard work means, don't you?
Poor Thomas couldn't answer. He had no breath. He just puffed slowly away to rest and had a long, long drink. He went home very slowly and was careful afterwards never to be cheeky to Gordon again. Thomas's train. Thomas often grumbled because he was not allowed to pull passenger trains. The other engines laughed.
You're too impatient.
They said,
You'd be sure to leave something behind. Rubbish.
said Thomas crossly.
You just wait. I'll show you.
One night he and Henry were alone. Henry was ill. The men worked hard, but he didn't get better. Now Henry usually pulled the first train in the morning and Thomas had to get his coaches ready.
If Henry is ill,
He thought.
perhaps I shall pull his train.
Thomas ran to find the coaches.
Come along, come along.
He fussed,
There's plenty of time, there's plenty of time.
grumbled the coaches. He took them to the platform and wanted to run round in front at once, but his driver wouldn't let him.
Don't be impatient, Thomas.
He said. So Thomas waited and waited. The people got in, the guard and station master walked up and down, the porters banged the doors, and still Henry didn't come. Thomas got more and more excited every minute. The fat director came out of his office to see what was the matter, and the guard and the station master told him about Henry.
Find another engine.
He ordered.
There's only Thomas.
They said.
You'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now.
So Thomas ran round to the front and backed down so on the coaches, ready to start.
Don't be impatient.
Said his driver.
Wait till everything is ready.
But Thomas was too excited to listen to a word he said. What happened then, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train. Perhaps Thomas was too impatient to wait till they were ready. Or perhaps his driver pulled the lever by mistake. Anyhow, Thomas started. People shouted and waved at him, but he didn't stop.
They're waving because I'm such a splendid engine.
He thought importantly.
Henry says it's hard to pull trains, but I think it's easy. Hurry, hurry, hurry.
He puffed, pretending to be like Gordon. As he passed the first signal box, he saw the men leaning out, waving and shouting.
They're pleased to see me.
He thought,
They've never seen me pulling a train before. It's nice of them to wave.
and he whistled
Peep, peep. Thank you.
and hurried on. But he came to a signal at danger.
Bother.
He thought,
I must stop, and I was going so nicely too. What a nuisance signals are.
and he blew an angry
Peep, peep.
on his whistle. One of the signalmen ran up.
Hello, Thomas.
He said,
What are you doing here?
I'm pulling a train.
said Thomas proudly.
Can't you see?
Where are your coaches then?
Thomas looked back.
Why, bless me.
He said,
If we haven't left them behind.
Yes,
said the signalman.
you better go back quickly and fetch them.
Poor Thomas was so sad he nearly cried,
Cheer up.
said his driver.
Let's go back quickly and try again.
At the station, all the passengers were talking at once. They were telling the fat director, the station master and the guard what a bad railway it was. But when Thomas came back and they saw how sad he was, they couldn't be cross. They coupled him to the train, and this time he really pulled it. But for a long time afterwards, the other engines laughed at Thomas and said,
Look, there's Thomas who wanted to pull a train but forgot about the coaches.
Thomas and the trucks. Thomas used to grumble in the shed at night.
I'm tired of pushing coaches. I want to see the world.
The others didn't take much notice, for Thomas was a little engine with a long tongue. But one night, Edward came to the shed. He was a kind little engine and felt sorry for Thomas.
I've got some trucks to take home tomorrow.
He told him.
If you take them instead, I'll push coaches in the yard.
Thank you.
Said Thomas.
That will be nice.
So they asked the drivers next morning, and when they said yes, Thomas ran happily to find the trucks. Now trucks are silly and noisy. They talk a lot and don't attend to what they're doing. They don't listen to their engine, and when he stops they bump into each other screaming.
Oh! Whatever is happening?
And I'm sorry to say they play tricks on an engine who's not used to them. Edward knew all about trucks. He warned Thomas to be careful, but Thomas was too excited to listen. The shunter fastened the coupling, and when the signal dropped, Thomas was ready. The guard blew his whistle.
Peep, peep,
Answered Thomas, and started off. But the trucks weren't ready.
Oh!
They screamed as their couplings tightened.
Wait, Thomas, wait!
But Thomas couldn't wait.
Come on!
He puffed, and the trucks grumbled slowly out of the siding onto the main line. Thomas was happy.
Come along!
He puffed,
All right, don't fuss! All right, don't fuss!
grumbled the trucks. They clattered through the stations and rumbled over bridges. Thomas whistled,
Beep, beep!
and they rushed through the tunnel in which Henry had been shut up. They came to the top of the hill where Gordon had stuck,
Steady now. Steady.
warned the driver, and he shut off steam and began to put on the brakes.
We're stopping!
Called Thomas,
No!
answered the trucks, and bumped into each other.
Go on!
And before his driver could stop them, they had pushed Thomas down the hill and were rattling and laughing behind him. Poor Thomas tried to stop them from making him go so fast.
Stop pushing!
He hissed, but the trucks would not stop.
Go on!
They giggled on their silly way. He was glad when he got to the bottom. Then he saw in front the place where they had to stop.
Oh dear, what shall I do?
They rattled through the station, and luckily the line was clear, and they swerved into the goods yard.
Oh!
Groaned Thomas, as his brakes held fast and he skidded along the rails,
I must stop!
and he shut his eyes tight. When he opened them, he saw he had stopped just in front of the buffers, and there watching him was the fat director.
What are you doing here, Thomas?
He asked sternly.
I brought Edward's trucks.
Thomas answered,
Why did you come so fast?
I didn't mean to. I was pushed.
said Thomas sadly.
Haven't you pulled trucks before?
No, sir.
Then you will not to learn about trucks, little Thomas. They are silly things and must be kept in their place. After pushing them about here for a few weeks, you'll know almost as much about them as Edward. Then you'll be a really useful engine.
Thomas and the breakdown train. Every day the fat director came to the station to catch his train, and he always said hello to Thomas. There were lots of trucks in the yard, different ones came in every day, and Thomas had to push and pull them to the right places. He worked hard. He knew now that he wasn't so clever as he thought. Besides, the fat director had been kind to him, and he wanted to learn all about the trucks so as to be a really useful engine. But on the siding by themselves were some trucks that Thomas was told he mustn't touch. There was a small coach, some flat trucks, and two queer things his driver called trains.
That's the breakdown train. When there's an accident, the workmen get into the coach and the engine takes them quickly to help the hurt people and to clear and mend the line. The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines and coaches and trucks.
One day, Thomas was in the yard and he heard an engine whistling,
Help!
and a goods train came rushing through much too fast. The engine, a new one called James, was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire and smoke and sparks streaming out on each side.
They're pushing me!
He panted.
On!
Laughed the trucks, and still whistling.
Help!
Poor James disappeared under a bridge,
I'd like to teach those trucks a lesson.
said Thomas the tank engine. Presently a bell rang in the signal box and a man came running.
James is off the line. The breakdown train. Quickly!
He shouted. So Thomas was coupled on, the workmen jumped to their coach and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest.
Hurry!
He puffed, and this time he wasn't pretending to be like Gordon, he really meant it.
Bother those trucks and their tricks.
he thought.
I hope poor James isn't hurt.
They found James and the trucks in a bend in the line. The brake van and the last few trucks were on the rails, but the front ones were piled in a heap. James was in a field with a cow looking at him, and his driver and fireman were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt.
Never mind, James.
They said.
It wasn't your fault. It was those wooden brakes they gave you. Always said they were no good.
Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside. Then he pulled the unhurt trucks out of the way.
Oh dear, oh dear.
They groaned,
Serves you right, serves you right.
puffed Thomas crossly. When the men put other trucks on the line, he pulled them away too. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all the afternoon.
This'll teach you a lesson, this'll teach you a lesson.
He told the trucks, and they answered
Yes it will, yes it will.
in a sad, groany, creaky sort of voice. They left the broken trucks and mended the line. Then, with 2 cranes, they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed. The fat director was waiting anxiously for them.
Well, Thomas,
He said kindly.
I've heard all about it, and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine. James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint. And you shall have a branch line all to yourself.
Oh, sir.
Said Thomas happily. Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line all to himself and puffs proudly backwards and forwards with 2 coaches all day. He is never lonely because there's always an engine to talk to at the junction. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry and does not stop, but he never forgets to say
Poop, poop.
to little Thomas, and Thomas always whistles
Peep, peep.
in return.
Well, we've now finished the second book in the Railway series, Thomas the Tank Engine. So anybody that was familiar with the previous episodes, we will now do our review. We'll have the Thomas fan review from Thomas and myself, and we'll have the Normie review from Fran and Matthew. We'll start with Fran and Matthew first. What did you think of the stories?
They were certainly more gripping this time round. I think like it was intense. I find myself being like, it seems to be like I think what they're doing here is they're trying to really introduce the character of Thomas and his personality. Quite, they're trying to kind of show you that straight away. They're not taking their time with it. I think they're straight in there with this is how Thomas works, and this is the kind of character he is. So I think they maybe deliberately made it quite intense, that particular episode.
I feel like there's obviously there's always a big difference between the previous book that we read through, the first book, and this book, probably because obviously the first one was called, what was it, the three engines or something?
Yeah,
like
3
that?
railway engines.
The 3 railway engines, so it's kind of like a little bit more vague, whereas this is Thomas.
Yeah.
This is Thomas, so like you can clearly see that shift into like where the first one's kind of like, do you get what I mean? It's just about engines.
Yeah, it was like 3
This is
separate.
about a very specific engine. It's about Thomas, and like you can kind of tell that they're, as you say, they're trying to establish the character. As far as I know, through the other books, obviously there are a lot more that are kind of like that, where it's the book's focused around a particular character rather than just the
Yeah, because the
railway engines.
the 3 railway engines, it was like 3 separate stories, and then they kind of combine them together at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas this one there's a central character, and there's a character arc that he's got to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
They've
they
kind of separated him from his peers as well, if that makes sense. So they're showing that he can be a bit of a cheeky character, but then it's almost like people expect that of him as well, and they kind of egg it on a little bit with the friends, kind of like, or the other engines kind of laughing and like kind of mocking him almost. Like I thought that was quite interesting to see the difference in the characters, the personalities.
It's kind of like, I think there was more of it in the first one, but it's like kind of like a light bullying kind of almost theme to it, and
It's
I
very
don't
much
know if that's an
symbolic.
intentional thing or if it's like a sign difference in the sign of the times and stuff like that, where like you were talking about in the previous episode about stuff being PC. I don't think that would be as acceptable nowadays.
No, yeah.
But it probably is like a good lesson for people to learn. And you know, there are going to be some nasty people out there. There are going to be people that either mock what you're doing or they try and egg you on to do something silly. Which is good. Like, it's maybe stuff as well that like it's kind of weird looking at it from an adult perspective. And
Yeah. It's definitely different.
I'm not sure would some of the things that we're picking up, would a kid even pick those up? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Certainly not the subtleties of it.
Yeah.
You know, they might get the kind of idea, the overall idea, but it's certainly that's maybe something I would say as well. It's a lot more like the writing style of it's a lot more developed.
You kind of expect
Less.
now to know what the characters are like. I think they've just kind of thrown you right into the deep end now, and it's like.
And it's kind of more detailed. I think like the less simplistic than the real engines.
What about the illustrations? Even though Dolby went back and re-illustrated some of the books, you can still see Payne's kind of style on it, well, at least from a Thomas fan perspective.
Yeah,
Like,
from a fan's perspective maybe, but again I think as a non-fan, I wasn't noticing a huge difference in the
I don't think
illustrations.
there's a huge difference.
No, I just thought it looked quite
I
similar.
think the style's like quite the same, but then maybe the context is a bit different.
Aye.
So like the scene where James had come off the tracks and stuff like that looks quite tense. Using the same word you use. So I mean, like
I think you guys notice these things more at this stage than I think as we go on we'll maybe notice more of a difference in the illustrations. At the moment I'm still seeing,
the same sort of thing.
I don't know if I'm just maybe not concentrating a lot on that side of it that I've not noticed, but I think it looks...
I've never actually looked at them side by side, to be honest with you.
Definitely.
Yeah, but they seem. I think they do seem like a little less. I mean, I don't know if these are all the same illustrations on these books anyway, but that have been redone. But like the
3 railway engines
it didn't
book,
seem quite as like the illustrations on the first one were a bit like not better's not the real word that I'm looking for,
Polished?
but polished, yeah. And they seem a bit rougher, but like a bit more dramatic almost.
well, it's funny you should say about putting it side by side, because we do still have the 3 railway engines book, so I'll bring them out and you can have a look at the styles. Now this one, for those listening at home, the 3 railway engines was completely re-illustrated by Dolby, so it's a lot of his style that's on it, whereas Payne's work, well, it seemed like Dolby only kind of touched it up, so it's a lot more of his style is imprinted. Fran, if you could take the tops of the tank engine book, thank you, and I'll take the 3 railway engines. And I'll show you one where I think it's quite evident in the different styles. So we'll have a picture from the Sad Story of Henry, the first illustration, and if you give me that one, and I'll show you the one that I mean. We'll go to the start of Thomas's trucks, I believe it is. So, and specifically look at Henry himself. Like Henry in there, like you can see the kind of maybe the more distinct kind of selves. He's more colourful.
Yep.
His face is a little bit more expressive.
Yeah.
Like the red and the greens, they really seem to pop
Bolder,
out.
yeah.
Pop out a bit more. When it comes to Payne's kind of style, it's a bit more. I'd say a bit of a darker.
Sinister looking.
Yeah,
almost.
it's kind of a darker kind of shift in style. What
I think
the
it's like
what the,
it is, but it's also like I'm also slightly more cartoonish. Does that make
I
sense?
think particularly with
Particularly
Thomas.
Thomas's face,
Yeah.
yeah. It's, well, the one thing I've always known, what I think could probably be a very good example is Edward's face in that Thomas and the Trucks illustration compared to Edward's Day Out. Now, look at that face there and look at it there. You can see such a difference.
Oh,
it
aye.
looks like 2 completely different
That I
engines.
think looks more female in this one.
Yeah, Edward does. So I'm not sure. Like, see, we'll look at it from Thomas's
It's
perspective.
almost like softer
That's-
features.
So what do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely see there's like, because with Edward, obviously in Thomas and the Trucks, obviously with that being a few things along, you can definitely tell there's been the difference with how the faces come out.
Yeah, well, and especially with the kind of illustration, like Edward, it looks more kind of what Edward should look in Dolby's illustration, like
Yeah.
that. Like, it has that bit of a more bubbly, kind of happier kind of style of face, whereas there, it just looks like a completely different engine to me.
It does look
Well, I remember looking at the book when I was a teenager and thinking, wait, that's meant to be Edward. I was like, is that a new engine?
Yeah.
It looks a bit more like, for a Thomas perspective, I think it looks a bit like Molly
A wee bit,
in the
yeah.
hit era.
I know. Just a
And
wee
it's,
bit.
that brings out like the Fran's point about the feminine features as well. Well, and we'll put up a picture of Molly and probably a picture of the Edward side by side to see
Yeah.
to see what the fandom thinks, and what if you want to leave a comment about it, please feel free, but no death threats as in the previous channel. So we'll jump over to what the Thomas fandom and ourselves.
Aye.
Right. So one thing that I definitely noticed was Thomas's number.
Yes.
The number 1 is clear on Thomas, but there's still no numbers on any of the other engines.
Yes.
Well, do you think that was a deliberate thing?
Well, I think as well, because please comment anyone if I do get this wrong. I know the little model of Thomas that Christopher got from the Reverend actually did have the number 1 on it.
Yeah.
So
Also had it, I think it's NWR as
Yeah,
well.
on, like,
Cardiff,
the
it's not
bunker.
like Northwestern Railway for our normies.
Mm-hmm.
Right. A lot of the any of the trains like where they were from, they were always abbreviated. So
Right.
like G, so
You
G,
get LNER,
Yeah.
that's still,
Yeah.
they still run.
yeah.
You still get an LNER train, can't
Yeah.
you?
Yep, so you've got like LNERs, like for example, Duck, who'll come up in the later books. He still has his GWR, and that stands for Great Western Railway, where Duck is originally from. So we have those type of things as well. One of the things that I like is, it threw me off guard as being someone that watched the series before reading the books again, was James.
yes.
And I never knew that James was in his original black and red livery.
Yeah.
Livery is basically a paint job.
Okay.
So he was originally a black and red livery, and he wasn't always seen in his red livery, just his plain red with yellow, I believe. But when you watch the classic series on TV, he was always red.
Right.
It was probably down to like budgetary issues because
Yeah.
it cost too much to repay them, because the models, it was £2,000 per model
Yeah.
Wow.
that cost for each engine.
Because I think as well because I mean even with like the first few stories with like Edward and Gordon,
Mhm.
they that was the first time we'd seen at least engines 1 to 5 at least.
Yeah.
So it was like, I think just instead of actually getting different engines made, they just were like, right, we need something to fill the scene, just put them in there.
Yeah, it's also why Henry is repainted to blue in the books, but he stayed green in the series because
Again,
because
budget.
eventually Audrey in the books goes back to making Henry green.
Uh-huh.
So there was no point in taking a £2,000 model, having it green, repainting it blue, then repainting
you
it
go back
again
again.
to go back to green.
Yeah.
You can kind of see as well, like, it's not so much a problem when you're reading a book because it's less visual, but when you're watching a TV series, if you've got both Henry and Thomas or both the blue engine, sorry, that would get confusing
Yeah.
and stuff like that, whereas
Yeah.
just keeping them green probably just makes it less confusing.
A fun fact for you both, it's one that's well known in the Thomas fandom, and it's Horden.
Yes.
And basically what had happened was in one of the series 4 episodes, there was a blooper where Henry actually has one of Gordon's resin faces on the front, so it just basically looks like a green Gordon, and that blooper was infamously known as Horden because it was like the Henry Gordon crossbreed.
Horden or Genry. That's
Yes,
the two I've heard.
Henry.
Horden.
And he also appeared in series 12 as well, in Hank's
Yes.
episodes, I believe, where he popped up and it was like, oh, they've done it again.
Uh-huh.
They've done it again.
I never
So-
actually noticed that one for years though. It was only then when the fandom pointed out, I was like, oh my god, they've done it again.
Also, I've only just watched series 12, so I'd already knew about it, and I was like, oh, there it is. There's that thing. So it was for me, it was quite ironic that Henry's repainted blue, and he looks like Edward and Gordon. Yet in the classic series, the infamous blooper is that Gordon essentially looks like Henry.
Yeah.
Pretty much that.
So for anybody listening at home, we're showing them the blooper.
Oh yeah.
Now for kids, it's, especially watching these, kids pick up on the tiniest detail,
Oh,
as
of
you know,
course, they
Fran.
love their routine, don't
They love their routine, they love seeing things like that. And I remember watching that as a kid and going, when did Gordon get in this scene? So it was quite funny to have that. And it's just noticing the little differences between the two as
It'd be
well.
interesting to see as the books go on, like what the difference in the illustration, if that's what you're picking up on just a couple of books already.
Yeah. Well, I'll say because we're technically classed as the seasoned pros, which is nice to be classed as a pro at something. Well, it's things that we can notice with a little bit more of the fan detail, but for any listeners that are just wanting to find out a bit more about Thomas, they'll be going through the same experiences as Fran and Matthew, so that's also nice. Well, now that we've finished our railway review, it's time for the final decision. So for those of you who may be new to the channel, after every review we get our very important passenger, give each railway series book a yay or a nay. And at the end we will tally up each grading to find out for the final episode, once and for all, if Thomas was best for children,
That's
for
my
adults,
nose on the thing.
and what was the best era for the railway series. It was originally called Franye or Franne, but now that we have adopted Matthew into the fold,
Should we do a frafew or a mansis?
well, I'm not sure how your partner might feel
I know,
about
that's a good
that.
point. That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, because it's also
I'm
something.
just thinking with the trains, it might be quite fun.
Especially
yeah,
since,
no, you're
since
right.
we're talking about Horden, we're converting them already, my friends. We're converting them. They're coming up with their own shamies.
That's
Well,
hilarious.
so
I've
we'll
been
have.
catching myself when
I
I say
know,
train.
right? I know.
Yes,
It's
he
an
catches himself with a train, and what we have educated. Yes, it is steam
It's not a
engine.
train, it's an engine.
It's a steam engine.
I'm going to need
Get
a
that
course or something.
There's degrees in this.
I'm sure Luke Bainham will probably come up with a course as we speak if I gave him the opportunity. He's given so much information. Once again, Luke, thank you so much for the information. And before we do get the Matthew, thank you again for letting us use your studio
Yes,
for
thank
the
you.
recording. It's a great place where I can hide from the wife once a month.
Oh, she'll hear this and batter you.
Oh, she doesn't care about my stuff. It's okay. Well, she's just glad that I come home and I'm like, hey.
That's
So-
what it's all about. It's just a place for people to come and live out their creative dreams and passions and stuff like that.
I think that's a great tagline. To live out your creative passions, come to Scuff Studios. I think that's your tagline. There we go. I'll give you that one for
Write
free.
that one down.
So, right. So what are we going to call it? I think we should call it Norm Yay or Norm Nay. So,
Try saying that after you had a few drinks.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and that's why I don't drink. So, you've read the book, we've had our discussion, so Fran and Matthew, we'll take time away, you can have your analysis, come to a mutual decision, and then we'll bring you back and the judges will let us know if it gets a norm yay or a norm nay. Normies, you have returned. Have you reached the decision?
We have reached a decision.
What say you? Is it norm yay or norm nay?
So yeah.
It's a yay from me.
It's a yay!
Four-part harmony there, hear that?
Yeah, we'll work on that as we go.
We'll work on the four-part harmony.
Well, the Dolby era so far is 242. Well, are you excited, Thomas?
I am definitely excited, Andrew.
I'm very excited. The evidence is growing. It's compiling. Thank you so much for listening to Railway Reviews, listening to the driver and Durning,
Byron, Charles Lawrence.
and our very important passengers.
Fran Gilmartin.
And Matthew Hill.
Until next time, I advise you all to take care, stay safe. Bye bye.